9 days after I buried my grandmother, 2 deputies came into the feed store where I worked and read me my rights on the loading dock while the whole crew stood there holding their gloves. The charge was stealing from her. Her will had been read that week, and one line in it cut me out of everything she owned. I had slept on a cot in her front room 4 years and signed for every prescription out of her account, and that signature was what they used to put me in the car. But nobody in that lot knew, me least of all, was that 2 nights before she died, she left a message on her old lawyer's answering machine. It sat in a box in a closed office all the year that came after it. If you have ever been the one who stayed, doing the driving and the pill counting while everybody else phoned in on holidays, you know how fast that counts for nothing once there is an inheritance on the table. Hey, I want to tell you what my uncle did with that year and what it cost him, down to the last thing he still cared about. Her name was Ida May Ruker, and she called me Sonny from the day my mother left me on her porch with a garbage bag of clothes. I was 7, 8. When the first stroke took her left side, I was 26 and 8 months into a lineman apprenticeship, and I quit on a Thursday without telling anybody why. She could not stand hot coffee, so I made hers with 2 spoons of powdered creamer and an ice cube dropped in last, and turned the handle toward her good hand. 4 years of that, and nobody paid me, and I never asked. She had 1 son left, my Uncle Dale, and he came at Christmas and on her birthday, and he always came loud. He ran the lumber yard on the highway, sat on the board at the Marbury Community House, and shook hands like a man running for something. He would stand in her kitchen with his coat on and tell her she ought to be in a home, then leave before the trash needed taking out. 11 weeks before she died, he started coming by on weeknights, which was new. The small strokes kept coming by then, and the patch for the pain put her under at odd hours, and on bad days she asked when my mother was coming back for me. Dale turned up around 7, after her evening dose, with a folder open on the table, and if I came in, he said they were talking business. Go check the mail. So I checked the mail. That is what I did for 4 years, because she raised me on the idea that you never fight your own family in front of people. Hold on to that one. It is the exact thing that got me. She died on a Tuesday morning, early, with my hand under her shoulder blade. At the funeral, my uncle stood in front of the whole town and talked 11 minutes about holding her hand at the end. They printed a program with the family listed on the back, and my name was not on it. 2 days later, the locks were changed. I came back from the county office with a folder of death certificates, and my key turned a 1/4 inch and stopped. Everything I owned was out on the porch in 3 contractor bags, and it had rained Saturday night, and the bottoms had gone soft. Dale leaned on his tailgate at the end of the driveway and let me pick up the first bag before he said anything. He said, "You slept in her front room 4 years, buddy." He said, "Call it rent." The will gave him the house, the 4.5 acres, the savings, even the money she set aside for her own burial. At the bottom of the second page, there was one line about me. In lawyer language that sounds so calm, read out loud. It said she was making no provision for her grandson Wesley, who had been provided for during her lifetime. Provided for 4 years of coffee with 1 ice cube in it. And on paper, that is what they called it. I did not fight it. I told myself we would settle it at the table, the way she always said, once everybody calmed down. 9 days after the funeral, the deputies came. Dale had walked into the sheriff's office with her bank statements and a story about a grandson bleeding an old woman for years. Every grocery run, every copay, every $20 of gas to haul her to the clinic in Ashford, laid out in a row, and in a row it looked like exactly what he said it was. The store let me go while I was still in the back of the car. The bondsman wanted $350, and I had $81, and 1 phone call and nobody to spend it on. I sat in county 11 weeks. Oh. There is an order to a place like that, and I learned mine the first night, when a man asked what I was in for and took his tray somewhere else. Somebody wrote a word on the underside of my bunk in pencil, and I read it every night for 2.5 months. I never once said her name in that building. That was the only thing I had left, and I kept it. On a Thursday at the end of June, a clerk handed me a paper saying the state was not going forward. That is the whole ceremony. No trial, no apology, no judge saying out loud that I did not do it. The arrest made the county paper, and the drop charge did not, and that is how I learned that innocent and cleared are two different things. I came out with a plastic bag and a record you can pull up in 9 seconds on a phone, and 3 landlords ran that search. In August, they held the estate sale, and I parked across the road because Dale's lawyer had written telling me to stay off the property. They had folding tables on the grass in front of the porch where I used to set her chair. And in the middle of the second table, with a green sticker on the lid, was the shoebox with every school picture of me from 2nd grade on. $1. I stood across that road about 40 minutes, and I did not have $1 on me because my last 11 had gone in the truck. A woman in a sun hat picked it up, looked in it, and paid. I watched my whole childhood get carried to a car in a stranger's hands, while Dale worked the cash box in a golf shirt, laughing. After that, I quit trying. I slept in my truck behind the laundromat on Route 9 and washed up in the sink before it opened. For a while there, if somebody said Sonny out loud in a parking lot, I did not turn my head, not once. I would lie in the bed of that truck listening to the dryers turn and work out, calm as reading a fuel gauge. How many days it would take one person to notice if I did not come back for a shift. The number I kept getting was 4. The only thing of hers I still had was the bent spoon she stirred her coffee with, and I kept it in the glove box. In September, the county paper ran a photograph of my uncle standing in an empty room at the Marbury Community House. They were naming it after her, the Ida Mayru Care Room. Dale had his hand flat on the wall like he was holding it up. I read that on a laundromat floor at 6 in the morning, and something in me went quiet instead of loud. She swept that hall 30 years for nothing, and here he was spending her savings to put her name on a wall so people would say his. I drove to the courthouse in the clothes I had slept in and asked what it cost to copy a probate file. 50 cents a page. I paid $11.40 for the file on my own grandmother's estate and read it on the courthouse steps. 3 things in there changed my life, and my uncle did not know any of them were dangerous. The first was the top of page 1, where the new will revoked every will she had ever made before it, which meant there was an earlier one, and I could hear her in that kitchen, saying it the way she always did, that if anything happened, Mr. Ella Reed Doss had her papers. The second was the affidavit of witnesses, swearing that on the 4th of March, 2 people watched Idu Mayruker sign her name at a kitchen table of her own free will. One signature belonged to a notary at the title company Dale used, and the other to a girl named Kay Lou Pruitt, 19, who ran the register at his counter. I knew exactly where my grandmother was on the 4th of March. She was 40 miles away in a recliner at the clinic in Ashford with a needle in her hand. And she made me take her picture because that blanket was the ugliest thing she had ever seen. That picture was still on my phone with the date sitting right on it. The third was a certificate of service signed by Dale, swearing to the court he had mailed notice of the will to every heir at their last known address. Under my name, he had written the address of the house he changed the locks on 8 weeks before. And on the day he swore he mailed it, I was in a county cell 40 minutes up the road. And he knew it because his statement put me there. He was so sure it was over that he wrote down in his own hand, on court paper, under oath, the one thing that could open it all back up. I found Kayla Pruitt working a gas station register on the bypass because Dale had let her go in the spring. I asked whether she had ever met my grandmother, and she stood a long time holding my change out and said no. She had never laid eyes on Ida May Ruker, and she still had the texts where Dale called it lumberyard business and told her where to sign. I asked whether she would ever say that out loud in front of people, and she looked at the door and said she did not know. Mr. Doss was 81 and living above his own closed office on Dupree Street. He shut the practice when his eyes went and never threw a file away in 50 years. And that is the only reason any of this exists. He had the old will out of a cabinet in 2 minutes, 3 pages, leaving the house and the 4.5 acres to me, in her words, for staying. Then he got quiet and asked if I knew she had called him. He said she rang late on a Sunday, and the phone rolled to the machine, and by the time he came in Monday, she was in the hospital, and Tuesday she was gone. He set the machine on the desk between us and pressed the button with one finger. And then my grandmother was in the room. She sounded far off and very tired, and she got the month wrong and called him Mr. L.A.R.E., which was his father's name and not his. She said Dale had been at the table again with his papers. She said he would not go home until she put her name on them, and she signed to get some peace and never read a word of it. She said, "I do not want that boy put out of my house," she said. "Come Monday and put it back the way it was." And the last thing before the machine cut her off was, "Do not tell Dale I called." I put my head down on that man's desk and came apart, and he let me and did not say a word until I was finished. Then he cleaned his glasses on his shirt and told me the hardest thing I heard all year. He said, "A voice on a machine is not a will, and it cannot give a man a house or take one back." Then he leaned forward. He said, "It is not a will, son. It is a witness." We were never going to prove what she wanted, he said. We were going to prove what he did. And then the part I did not understand until later. When you knock a will down, the estate does not go to nobody. The one before it stands back up. The one in his cabinet, with my name in it. So here is what my uncle could not see coming, and what you can see from where you sit. Every single thing he needed to be true, he had already written down himself. Doss filed to reopen the estate and throw the new will out, and would not take $1 for it. Dale's lawyer answered in 9 days, and the answer was one word dressed up in 11 pages. Late. The window to fight a will here is 4 months, and mine had run out in September, half of it while I was in a cell, and the rest behind a laundromat. And then my uncle did the thing that finished him, and he did it because he could not help himself. He did not go through the lawyers. He wrote to me himself, offering $8,000 to sign a release, and telling me to think what a jury would make of a man with a record like mine. I took my phone to Dupree Street, and Doss read it twice and told me what to send back, and it was one sentence. I wrote, "Before I sign anything, tell me the exact day she signed it." He answered in under an hour. He wrote, "The 4th of March, at my kitchen table, with 2 witnesses, and you can ask either one of them. Sit with that a second." He had the money, the house, the town, and the sheriff, and he sat in his recliner and typed the date out for me, because to him I was still the boy who checked the mail. Doss printed it, slid it in the folder behind the picture of her in that ugly blanket, and all he said was, "Well." The hearing was in November, in a courtroom about the size of a classroom, and Dale wore the golf shirt. His lawyer made the whole thing sound like a formality, and honestly, it was. The judge looked at the calendar, then at me, and said the estate had been closed since summer. A deadline is a deadline, and he was inclined to be done before lunch. I have never had a room close over my head the way that one did. Everything she left me was about to end on a technicality, and Dale turned in his chair and gave me a small, pleased look, like a man watching a dog work a fence. Then Mr. Doss stood up, slow, both hands flat on the table. He said he was not asking the court to excuse a late filing. He was asking it to look at how the notice was served, and he put 3 pieces of paper in front of that judge. Dale's own certificate of service, swearing he mailed the notice to me at the house. The sheriff's booking record, showing I was in that county's own jail the whole week he swore he mailed it. And a locksmith's invoice showing Dale had paid to change every lock on that house 8 weeks before. The room went quiet. The judge read all 3 twice, took his glasses off, and asked whether a letter mailed to a house counts as notice when his client is holding the only key. His lawyer did not have an answer. He vacated the order, reopened the estate, and set the whole thing for trial in the spring. It was not a win. It was a door coming back off the latch. Dale gave the paper a quote on the courthouse steps that afternoon, calling it a shakedown by the boy who stole from his own grandmother. He said the dedication of the Ida Mayru care room would go ahead on the 12th of December, because that is what she would have wanted. 9 days before the 12th, my phone rang, and it was him, and he was warm. He was so warm. He said the lawyers could do the lawyer thing. But family is family, and would I get up and say a few words about Nana? He wanted the photograph so badly that he handed me a microphone. I said yes before he finished asking. Then I made 2 calls, one to Dupree Street, and one to a gas station out on the bypass. There were maybe 90 people in that hall on the 12th of December, the church crowd, the board, the man from the paper. The plaque was on the wall under a white cloth. Dale talked about her hands. He talked about holding one of them at the end, which he did not. He said hard things had been said, but blood is blood. And then he put his arm out toward the back row and said his nephew had come. He called me Sonny in front of all of them to get a nicer photograph. I took the microphone out of his hand and thanked him for it. Then I said, my grandmother raised me to settle things at the table and never in front of people. I said, I need everybody here to know I am sorry about what I am about to do. And I said, most of you knew her, but almost none of you heard her at the end, and I would like you to. I held my phone up to the microphone and pressed play. 90 people stood in a room she swept for 30 years and listened to I Do Mayru Kerr on a Sunday night. Far off, very tired, saying Dale would not go home until she put her name on his papers, saying she signed it to get some peace and never read a word of it, saying I do not want that boy put out of my house, and then do not tell Dale I called. Nobody moved. A woman in the 3rd row said her name out loud like she was answering her. Dale said it was fake. He said it twice, loud, and came across the front for the phone, and I let him say every word of it. Then Mr. Doss stood up in a coat 2 sizes too big and said the recording came off the machine in his office, and he would swear to it under oath. Then I read out my uncle's own message. The 4th of March, at my kitchen table, with 2 witnesses, and you can ask either one of them. I said it back to him twice. Then I turned my phone around so the front rows could see her in that recliner, in ash furred, the needle in her hand, the ugly blanket, the 4th of March sitting right there on the picture. And I said, you told me to ask either one of the witnesses. So I did. Kayla Pruitt stood up at the back of that hall in her gas station shirt. She got about 6 words out before she started crying, and 6 was plenty. That was the end of my Uncle Dale in Marbury. The board chairman came up and asked, quietly, if we could leave the cloth on the plaque for now. His wife took the car keys out of his coat pocket and walked out with their daughter. Somebody went and unplugged the coffee urn, which for some reason is the part I remember best. My uncle stood by himself next to a table of cookies in the room he named after the woman he robbed. There was never a trial. His lawyer withdrew in January, and in February he signed a consent judgment setting the new will aside, which put the old one back on its feet. he was charged that spring with perjury for the paper he swore to the court, and with fraud, and took probation, restitution, and a felony beside his name. The lumberyard went to pay his lawyers. In April, a judge signed an order wiping my arrest, and the paper ran that on page 1, which is 1 page better than they ran the arrest. I moved back into the house in May and slept in a bedroom for the first time in 5 years. I took her spoon out of the glove box and put it back in the drawer where it lived. The first morning I made 2 cups out of habit, one with 2 spoons of creamer and an ice cube, and I drank mine and poured hers out. The community house kept her name on the room, and I asked the board for 1 line underneath, and it says she swept this hall for 30 years. I am back in the apprenticeship, on the polls at 31, oldest man in my class by 9 years. My cousin Dana has not spoken to me since that night, and she leaves flowers on the stone the first Sunday of every month, timed to be gone before I get there. But in June, a shoebox turned up on my porch with no note, and every school picture of me from 2nd grade on was still inside. And she had gone and found the woman in the sun hat. My grandmother was wrong about exactly one thing, and it cost her everything she owned. Some things do not get settled at the table. Some things only get settled out loud, in front of everybody, and a will your own family lied about is one of them. So let me ask you, because I think about it every time somebody tells me to keep the peace. If the whole town had already decided you were the thief, would you have stayed quiet to keep the family together, or made them stand there and listen to her? Tell me in the comments, because I do read them. And if you want to stay a while, subscribe. And next I will tell you about a man who cheated his sister out of a house and then asked her to cater his retirement party.